Welcome to the Today is a Good Day podcast, a podcast to bring you a new point of support as you navigate your NICU journey. Today is a Good Day is here to be a part of your conversations, whether your baby was born prematurely, has special needs, or if your family is grieving a loss. The voices you will hear on the Today is a Good Day podcast are personal stories from people who have been there. Please don't forget to hit subscribe and leave us a review on your favorite podcast listening app. On this episode, we will speak with Stephanie Cartin, joining us remotely. She is a fellow NICU mom, CEO of SocialFly, and co-host of the Entreprenista Podcast. You will hear Stephanie discuss her journey, reflecting on years of struggling to conceive, learning that she and her husband were expecting twins, and how they navigated the ups and downs of loss and joy in the NICU. Stephanie will share her biggest lessons learned and how to best advocate for yourself in the medical setting. And we'll also discuss how family and friends can support someone through different stages of the journey to become pregnant, loss, and a NICU stay. Stephanie, welcome. We're excited to have you remotely here with us. Can you tell us a little bit about your family's story?
Sure. And thank you so much for having me here to share my story and journey, because through everything that I've been through and my family has been through, it's just been so important to us to be able to share our experience, to be able to help other people. I've always found that you just have to find the good in everything that happens and do whatever we can to be able to help others. So thanks for having me to share our journey. So where to begin? We had quite the complicated journey to get pregnant and stay pregnant. From as far back as I can remember, I have always wanted to be a mom and to have a family. And I remember sharing with my husband early on, even before we got married, I shared with him, my biggest fear in life is not being able to get pregnant and not being able to have a family. There was just something inside of me that made me worry about actually being able to get pregnant, because I did have a complicated medical history myself growing up. So shortly after my husband and I got married, I decided that it would make sense to do genetic testing before we started trying to get pregnant, just to be sure everything seemed okay. And when I did the first round of genetic testing, because typically it starts with the woman, and we found out I was a premutation carrier of something called Fragile X. So at that time, we saw a genetic counselor, and Greg also did a round of genetic testing, and we didn't match for any of the same things. But the issue with the premutation carrier of Fragile X is that it's only passed down from the mom. So it didn't matter if Greg matched for that or not. So at that point, the genetic counselor recommended we speak with a reproductive endocrinologist to see if it would make sense just to start with IVF right away, because we could do genetic testing and be sure we weren't going to pass down that gene. So we met with a doctor. I decided at that point, let's just try to get pregnant on our own without any assistance. And, we could always do early genetic testing once we do get pregnant. So we tried for about a little over a year, I think, to get pregnant unsuccessfully. And then we went back to that same doctor, and it was an interesting experience. He was like, "Oh, you're back." Like, it was kind of like he was expecting us to be back here, which I remember didn't sit right with me. It didn't sit right with my husband, but we continued on. And it was actually my first learning going through the fertility process and doing research on the doctors that you're working with. I was just so, desperate to get pregnant. And I had a friend who had been to this doctor, and she had success. And I remember she told me, like, she didn't really mesh with his personality, but he got the job done. So I just listened to a friend, went to that same doctor, and didn't do my research. And I'll fast forward this story because I had quite a complicated fertility journey, but we ended up switching doctors. I found out that my entire uterine lining was covered in polyps. I had multiple procedures to remove them. Found out I had something called chronic endometritis, which is an infection of the uterine lining. Did about 6 IUIs that were unsuccessful. So it was month over month of disappointment and more disappointment. We finally decided that we would do IVF. Started the IVF process in the summer of 2018. Had a successful egg retrieval, and then found out that I still had this infection. This infection was still lingering. So I did a lot of research, talked to other women who had been through similar experiences, some women who were going through that same experience, and together found the right medication that I should be on. Told my doctor what to put me on. He finally listened to me, and this is a new doctor now, and was able to clear the infection based on all of the research that I did. And then in October of 2018, we were finally ready to do our embryo transfer. So we ended up putting in one embryo, and a few weeks later, we found out that the embryo had split. So we were expecting identical twin girls, and I was obviously overwhelmed because you weren't expecting it, but I was so excited. I kept saying, oh my gosh, 2 for 1. You know, we'd worked so hard to get pregnant, and with all of this time and effort and energy. And I was like, you know what, maybe we just won't have to go through this again because we'll have our infant family. We'll have our 2 girls. So we had some initial complications at the beginning of our pregnancy, and had a lot of bleeding, had to rush to the hospital and the doctor several times very early on. And then I had about 2 weeks during my pregnancy that everything was calm and normal. I think it was week 14 and week 15. And then at my 16 and a half week appointment, we found out during the early anatomy scan that we had something called twin-to-twin transfusion. And I still remember, that was those moments when the doctor comes in and starts telling you the most horrible news and something you obviously don't ever expect to hear or want to hear. It was just the most horrible, painful experience, and extremely overwhelming. And you almost go into this, I don't even know how to explain this, panic shutdown mode in that moment, just trying to take everything in and listen to what the doctor's saying. So at our 16 and a half week appointment, it was our early anatomy scan. And that was the appointment when we found out we had something that was called twin-to-twin transfusion. And I remember going into that appointment so excited because I couldn't, every appointment, it's oh, I can't wait to see them. And they're getting bigger at each appointment. And when my doctor walked in, because the tech does the scan, and then my doctor had come in while the scan was happening, and he actually wasn't supposed to be there that day. So I was I just knew instantly, my heart sunk. I just knew something wasn't right. And that's when he shared with us, it looked like we had the early stages of something called twin-to-twin transfusion.
And how, with the twin-to-twin transfusion, and I remember that from our personal journey of being pregnant with identical twin girls, and our girls had started that as well a little bit later on. We didn't have the opportunity to catch that or try to work on that. But how did you work through those emotions going into that appointment, feeling so much joy, and then to hear that news for others going through that? How'd you get through it?
Oh gosh. That day, I just remember it was just such a whirlwind because we were in the room where they do the scan, and then you get this horrible news, and the doctor says, get dressed and let's go talk in my office. So then brings us into this boardroom, and my husband and I are just sitting there waiting for him to come in. And I just remember just being so confused. And the crazy part of that day also was I was supposed to leave from that appointment to go speak at a conference for MasterCard. So I was getting picked up from that appointment. So I'm saying to my doctor, I remember I was just in shock, I think. I was like, oh, but I have to go right now. I have to go speak. And he's like, I don't think you should, I don't think you should be going there right now.
Those initial thoughts that come into your mind, right? It's just hard to process the reality of the moment.
Because I didn't know. I remember when we found out we were expecting twins, they had to go through, or the doctor did go through with us, all the potential risks that could happen during the pregnancy. And I remember, this was a few weeks before, it was probably my 10-week appointment. I remember saying to him, oh, no, please don't tell us. I don't want to put any of that into the universe. I don't want to know anything about it. I didn't want to do any research ahead of time because I didn't want to know, because that was not going to happen to us. And I'm still fine with how I handled that initially. I didn't want to know about it even back then, because I wanted to just be able to stay focused and stay positive and try to enjoy a pregnancy if possible.
Mm-hmm.
So we're now in this boardroom with him, and my whole focus is I'm telling my husband, they're picking me up to speak at this conference. Can you, like, we have to call this woman and tell her that I can't come. Like, I was just trying to problem solve that first. And I didn't even understand what it meant yet.
Right.
I knew it was bad, but I didn't really know. So Greg handled that. He made a call, and then the doctor said, okay, I'm going to sit down and explain what all of this means. So then he starts explaining it. And I remember I kept asking him, like, can you repeat that again? Can you write this down? Can you repeat that again? Because for me, I know just in moments of overwhelm or panic, like, I need things spelled out and written down for me because it's very hard to remember things.
It is. It is. We talk with
And
families all the time. Make sure you're journaling. Make sure you're writing
yes,
down the information that's shared with you.
yeah, write down everything. Or, we all have our cell phones
Right.
now. Take notes on it, voice record. I wish I had done more of that because sometimes you think you're going to remember things. You don't. You don't remember anything. So I remember, I think I was taking notes on my phone. He was like drawing diagrams, trying to explain what was going on. And then I just kept asking him, like, okay, like, what are the options? Like, what can we do? Like, I'm just such a problem solver, and that's how I am by nature. So I was just trying to figure out, like, how can we fix this? Like, how can we get to the bottom of this, and how can we fix this?
And what were your next steps? I know you talk about researching so much, and I want to come back to that, but what did you do next?
Yeah. So after that appointment, because I do remember, I think it was that appointment, he said to us at that point, he's like, one of the options is you can terminate one of the babies to try to save the other baby. And like, he was ready to do that day if we made that decision. And I'm like, whoa, I'm not making something I've learned. And I talk about this a lot, like in business, any very important decision, you have to sleep on everything. Like, don't just jump into something. And just because a doctor is sharing something with you or different recommendations, it doesn't mean, unless they tell you something has to be done in that moment because your life is in danger in that exact moment, like, take time to process, think through things, do research, talk to people who have maybe been in similar situations, and take time to make that decision. Because once you make a decision like that, there's no going back. So we spent several hours there. Greg and I remember we went home, and the first thing we did was we called Greg's mom, and let family members know what was going on. And then I immediately went to Facebook and I typed in twin-to-twin transfusion, and I looked for a twin-to-twin transfusion Facebook group because I had a lot of experience with these Facebook groups from when we were going through infertility treatment. So a lot of these, there's some incredible groups on Facebook that I was able to join, and that's how I problem solved a lot of my infertility issues through Facebook and Instagram. So joined a twin-to-twin transfusion Facebook group. I posted exactly what was going on, and immediately all of these women started responding, sharing their experience, sharing their journeys. And a few people sent me direct messages on Facebook, and someone sent me a message to this woman, Carolyn, who had been through a very similar experience, basically the exact same experience. She also happened to have gone to the same hospital and the same doctor as me. So within 24 hours, I was on the phone with her, and I was on the phone with, this was the other crazy thing that happened. A week before we found out about the twin-to-twin transfusion, I had the television on, and there was a commercial for the hospital, for Columbia Presbyterian. And there was a woman talking about her experience having twin-to-twin transfusion and the doctor at the hospital saving her babies. And it just so happened to be the doctor I was already going to. And I had said to my husband and my mother-in-law, God forbid anything happens in our pregnancy, at least we're at the right hospital, and at least we're going to the right doctor.
Right.
So I had been saying to my doctor, I kept saying, I saw the commercial. This was me in my panic. I saw the commercial. I know you can save my babies. And he was like, okay, Stephanie. So I ended up getting connected through my business mentor. Her book publisher happens to be the woman who was in the commercial.
Oh my goodness.
So within 24 hours from this Facebook group and through someone that I know, I'm connected with just two people who had been to my doctor who had positive outcomes, and they spent hours on the phone with me. And it was actually much more helpful for me to speak to them going through the situation than like hearing about the medical procedures from the doctor, if that makes sense.
when you looked at the journey ahead of you with the twin-to-twin transfusion, did they tell you the options for surgery for the termination of one of the babies? And when did you decide to move forward with the surgery?
Yeah. So it was I believe it was a Monday I had that appointment and we found out. And then we went back on that Friday to check and see what the progression was and what was happening. And at that appointment on that Friday, I was just praying for a miracle. They were going to say, oh, it's reverse, everything is fine.
Right.
But that wasn't the case. It still looked really bad. And our baby, Emmy, who passed, her fluid level was like at 1, like she had almost no fluid, and then Mollie had all of the fluid at that point. So, so we knew it was not a good situation. And my doctor had said, we can do the surgery today. You can choose we still didn't know what we were going to do. You could still elect to do the reduction today. I said, can we wait? Can we see what happens? Can we wait until next week? He's like, you can wait until Monday, but, I wouldn't be surprised if you've lost one or both of them by then. And I just couldn't make the decision of what to do that day. Again, it was Friday afternoon. I felt like I needed more time to think about it. We were back in that same boardroom. I called Carolyn on the phone again, one of the women who I was connected to. And she, had sat in that exact same room before. I was like, how did you decide what to do? Because she was being told the exact same things, and she elected to do the surgery. And she was told, there was not going to be a good chance that both of her babies would make it, because my doctor didn't feel that there was a good chance they would both survive the surgery. And then at the end of that doctor appointment, I said to him, is there even a chance? Do you think there's even a chance? And he said, well, there's a chance. And I said, okay, then that's what we're going to do, but we're going to wait. I want to wait until next week. Something inside my body didn't feel right about doing the surgery in that moment right then. I couldn't do it.
And so you did move forward with the surgery next week, the following
week.
We
did on that Monday. Now, I will say we left the hospital on Friday afternoon because we were there for hours, just going back and forth, talking about what to do, trying to figure out what the options were, making calls. And we got home, and then I had a bit of a panic attack when we got home. Did we make the wrong decision? Maybe we should have done this today. God forbid we wait until Monday, and now they both haven't made it. And I had asked for my doctor's cell phone number right before we left the appointment. So he gave me a cell phone number. So I texted him and I said, can we actually do the surgery today? Can we come back? And he actually tried to see if it was possible to make it happen, because
Right.
I just felt like, oh my God, what if I made the wrong decision? And then he called me back. He's like, look, it's Friday evening now. There's just not the right people here right now to do the surgery properly. He's like, I tried. And then at that point, I just accepted, okay, my first instinct was to wait until Monday. We're just going to go with that. And it's going to be okay. And that weekend, I just did everything I could to stay positive and to prepare myself and my body to be able to get through the procedure on that Monday. But I was terrified.
And Stephanie, at this point, were both girls still with you?
Yes.
At this point, yes.
Yes.
And when did you shared a little bit about Emmy passing, and tell us about that part of your journey and when that happened.
So we went back for the twin-to-twin transfusion procedure on that Monday. And it was a very, very traumatic experience. But at the end of the procedure, both Mollie and Emmy were still alive. So that evening, you stay over at the hospital, and the next morning, you go up for an ultrasound to check on them to see if the surgery worked. And that's actually when we found out, was the next morning, that Emmy did not have a heartbeat anymore. And I knew right away when they started doing the scan, because at that point, I had just gotten very good at knowing how they're reading the scans and their reactions, and I could see everything that was going on. And I saw right away she didn't have a heartbeat, and I just started crying. And I turned to Greg and I said, we at least we tried. We tried. We did whatever we needed to do to try to save both of them. And that gives me so much peace knowing that was her decision. That was not ours to make.
And I think with those decisions, you make the best decisions you can based upon the information you have, right? I mean, the whole NICU experience, on bed rest, pregnancy, all of those times when have a high risk pregnancy, trying to make those decisions are so difficult. And you try to make sure you're making the right choices, you're doing the best you can. And I still remember to this day, someone we spoke to after our daughters were born, we were really struggling with making the right decisions. And he said to us, you're making the best decisions based upon the information that you have. And that is what we always came back to. So now that you've gotten through this, and you all have certainly been through so much, how did you navigate your next steps? I mean, how did you talk with the medical team about setting up a birth plan, having both girls, but knowing that Emmy had passed away, but Mollie was still fighting? How'd you do that?
It's really interesting because none of that even came up right away. It was a very bizarre experience. So it was like, okay, they just called it then. You lost your baby B. Basically go home. we literally go home. And I just remember being like, what just happened? Like, what do we even do next? Mm-hmm. There wasn't that level of support from anyone there right away. It was a very bizarre experience. And I don't know what actually would have happened had things progressed normally after that, because 48 hours later, when I was home, I started leaking amniotic fluid. So now I was back at the hospital 48 hours later, and we found out that I had ruptured at that point. So it didn't even become a conversation about Emmy until we knew I was going to be admitted inpatient into the hospital. And this is now weeks ahead. The whole focus now was on just staying pregnant for Mollie. And that was it. And in the hospital, I had ruptured. I was being told, your pregnancy is probably ending. I'm 17 and a half weeks pregnant. You've lost all your amniotic fluid. You're probably going to go into labor. So now I'm at the hospital. Now it's another 24 hours. I hadn't gone into labor. So of course I'm in the hospital, and I go to Facebook and I posted the twin-to-twin transfusion group about what happened. And then women told me to join the PPROM Facebook group, which is premature rupture of your membranes. And so now I'm in that group. And another woman responds to me, and she happened to be in one of the hospital rooms a few doors down from where I was.
What a small world.
Same experience, twin-to-twin transfusion, and then she ruptured. Both of her babies survived the surgery, so she was in the hospital with both of them. But so now all these women are telling me, don't listen to the medical team if they're telling you to end the pregnancy. If you have a heartbeat, there's hope. These babies can make it. And I'm seeing all of these stories of all of these women who ruptured early. And they were able to stay pregnant by following something that's called the PPROM protocol. I started drinking a gallon of water every day, taking all of these vitamins, following a certain diet the best I could, trying to eat as many calories as possible. So now I'm educating my doctor and telling him all this stuff, and he had no idea what I was talking about.
Now, you went in on bed rest 17 and a half weeks?
So I was home. I stayed home on bed rest from 17 and a half weeks until 23 weeks.
Okay.
I would just go to the hospital twice a week now for appointments.
All right. And then you went into the hospital for the remainder of your bed rest.
Yeah.
After 23 weeks. And you were able to carry Mollie with her heart beating away until when was she born?
She was born 33 weeks, 6 days. I was induced. And I probably could have stayed pregnant longer, but at that point, because when you're ruptured, the risk of infection is, it's more risky to stay pregnant than to induce at that point. So she was already, fully developed, and it was time for her to come out. So the easiest part of my pregnancy was actually the delivery.
I'm sure. And I just cannot even imagine the joy that you felt seeing her. And as you look back on that experience, because all this time while you were on bed rest at home and while you were on bed rest at the hospital, you were also still carrying Emmy with you, which I think adds a whole other layer for this entire experience that you and Greg had. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you managed those expectations that you had of delivery and trying to honor Emmy, celebrating Mollie, and then looking at the reality of what that experience was actually like?
Yeah, absolutely. So something that we were very fortunate to have was a support system at the hospital. They have a program at New York Presbyterian called the Comfort Care Program. And being part of that program, I was able to have access to social worker, child life specialist, and a few other head nurse, neonatologist. And this team, they were our dream team. They became our family. They were really able to help us through the entire process of understanding what the delivery could be like when delivering both a baby that's born alive and a baby that is not. And we were able to meet with them even before I went inpatient to talk about what different birth plans and what things could look like. And then once I was inpatient, the team would come see me every single week. It actually almost felt like every single day someone from the team would come pop in and check in. So I really had that support system. And then we'll go back to Facebook groups again. I joined a Facebook group of women who had also lost a twin in utero, and asked, was trying to learn from their experiences about what could happen, because my understanding was when you lose a baby, between like 17 and 20 weeks, sometimes when you deliver, the baby still looks like a baby when you deliver. And sometimes the baby can be reabsorbed into the placenta and the baby is no longer there. And it was tough because we didn't know how Emmy was going to be when she was born. And I had a long time, leading up to the delivery to really process and just accept that she might be born looking like a baby. We might never get to see her, that whatever happens, it's going to be okay. And we'll just do the best that we can do. And that was the mentality that I had to have. So I didn't have these expectations of this whole ceremony and all of these other things that I, thought could happen or maybe would want to happen.
And in reality, were you able to get through that? How did you get through that?
So what ended up happening was the actual birth of Mollie was while it was probably the easiest part of the pregnancy because we didn't have any complications. Of course she was taken away and taken to the NICU, but I already knew that was going to happen. So that was expected. What ended up happening was we delivered Mollie and then delivered the placenta. And I remember the doctors were, going through the placenta, like looking to see if they could find her. And they came to tell me, like, it looks like she had been, reabsorbed into the placenta. And there was just so much commotion with Mollie being born at the same time I had been induced the night before. I hadn't slept. I just had it was
so much.
It was just such a whirlwind. But I do remember I did not feel well. After all the doctors and nurses had left the room, I really didn't feel well. I was extremely nauseous. And I had asked that the doctor come back in to do another ultrasound just to show me that she definitely wasn't in there anymore, that we didn't miss anything, because I was like so scared that what if she's still in there and you missed her? And they listened to my wishes and what I asked for, and they came in, they did another ultrasound and they showed me like she's not in there. So that was helpful for me to at least know, because I was emotional and scared.
Absolutely. And I think what's important about that to share with others is asking. Right? Open communication, talking with your medical team, asking them the things that you would really like to see, which is so helpful for medical teams to support you in that way by granting your wishes and making sure that you feel comfortable. Now, as you and Greg have been navigating this whole path, what impact did you see it having on him? I mean, how did he do through this? I know he's not here to share his story himself, but can you talk to us a little bit about it?
Yeah,
what you saw?
I mean, it was very, very hard on him because Greg just felt so helpless. And he would tell me, like, it was just so hard watching how sad I was. Like, when I was home it was like every single appointment, it was from one bad thing to another that was even worse. And me just being hysterical, but even through my hysterics and being so upset, I still kept problem solving. And he saw that, but he didn't want to see me in pain. And, he was the support person. Like he did everything for us during that time, from cooking, getting all the groceries, ordering food, driving to the appointments, taking care of our dog, going to work. Like he was, carrying a lot of weight, and he felt helpless at the same time because it was not going on in his body. And he was terrified and he was scared, and, he struggled a lot. And, I think now almost a year and a half, 2 years later, he's first starting to be able to get back to himself again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we talk about that with dads a lot and the impact that all of this has on them. And did you have a lot of family and friend support as well while you were on bed rest?
Yeah. So Greg's mom and stepdad lived close by. So they were so helpful. And his mom, like when Greg would go to work, his mom would come in and be with me because I couldn't really be, when I was home on bed rest, couldn't really be walking around and doing much. So she was so amazing. And then, my gosh, my friends were just absolutely incredible and my biggest cheerleaders. And I had been sharing my whole journey through Facebook and Instagram, from my fertility journey through all the complications of my pregnancy. And not only my, close friends who I, know in real life, but all of my friends and cheerleaders on social media. I had this whole team of people just cheering us on and being there for us every single step of the way. And my friends were coming to visit in the hospital and when I was home on bed rest and sending so much food, and was having a support system and team is just so, so important.
When people are going through this experience, I think they have trouble asking for help, or they don't know what they need, right?
Yep.
When people offer and say, well, just tell me what you need. I'll be there if you need, or do you need me to bring food? And they ask questions versus just moving forward and doing something for others. What was something that stood out for you that really meant a lot that your family or friends did for you?
I would say, because I was that way, I'm like, I don't need anything. I'm fine. I don't need anything. Because it's almost more trouble to think about in those moments what you actually need. One, you don't really know what you need. And two, your brain is just so
totally
foggy when you're going through all of this. You can't even think about what you need. So it's easier just to say you don't need anything.
Right.
But I mean, the things that we always need: help cleaning, food, dessert.
And it was great when people would just do it, right? They'd show up at your door with food or something for you.
Something that was hard for me that, and again, I'm not saying to not do this, but when we lost Emmy, a lot of people did send flowers, which was so sweet and so amazing. But it made, I would then start crying just looking at these flowers every day, because then it was a reminder to me that she wasn't here. So then I had to learn to reframe my thoughts. And it was like, these are beautiful. She would love them. Mollie loves them. And just reframing things that would get me upset. But that was just something personal for me. But everyone's different. Some people would love to get flowers. But I would say that if you have a friend or a family member who has gone through a loss or is going through a hard time, don't worry about doing something that they might not like. Just do something, because it's better. I would say it's better than nothing. And don't be scared to reach out.
Love that. Totally agree with that. That's really good advice. And now you and Greg have experienced the NICU. You've experienced the love and loss in the NICU, and also your fertility journey. What, for others going through that, what recommendations or advice do you have based upon what you all learned during that journey? And how would you encourage others to really speak up for themselves? I mean, so much of your story that you've shared today, it's the research that you did. It's the groups that you joined. It's other parents who you learned what happened for them, and then you turned around to ask questions about it. I mean, you were working really hard to be an advocate for your girls, for your family. So what's your biggest piece of advice for others?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, starting with the infertility process, something that I believe from everything I learned in my experience is there's no such thing as unexplained infertility. There's always a reason something is happening. And if you are working with doctors who don't know the answers and say something is unexplained, go find another doctor who's willing to put in that time and do the research to figure out how to get to the bottom of it, because there are answers out there. could it be that you might not be able to get pregnant because of something? That could be the case, but get to the bottom of it so you know that information, can make the best decision for yourself and for your body. Just keep researching and asking questions and learning from others. My biggest piece of advice for anything that you're going through, whether it's infertility or a complicated pregnancy or being in the NICU, is you have to be your own best advocate, and to find a doctor that you trust and feel comfortable with and will always advocate for you and is okay with you researching and looking for answers too. And finally, if something doesn't feel right, be sure to trust the voice that's inside of you. And lastly, just always hold on to hope. You just have to have that hope inside of you, because if you start to lose that hope, it's hard to keep moving forward. You just have to hold on to something.
Love that. Thank you so much for that advice. Now, most importantly, how's your sweet girl doing? What's she up to these days?
She is trying to walk. She can walk in her like a little assisted walker. So she's getting close. She's cruising everywhere. She has 4 teeth that have already come through, a 5th one that has just broken through over the past 2 days. So she's been a little cranky teething, but she is a ball of energy. She's always smiling. She's the happiest little thing. And I thank God every day. And I'm so grateful that I listened and we listened to our gut, and we trusted our heart, and we held on to hope and stayed positive. Because if you don't stay positive, if you don't allow yourself to stay positive and think positive through these experiences, it's very hard. So we are very lucky and very blessed, and she's the best.
Wonderful. Stephanie, thank you so much for being here today. I am grateful that our paths crossed, and I'm really appreciate you sharing your story with everyone.
Thank you so much. And for anyone listening, feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or want to connect. I personally use Instagram, and feel free to send me a DM at Stephanie Cartin, and I'm happy to connect with anyone.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Stephanie.
Thank you.